The stars hung silent in the vast darkness of the Andromeda sector, their ancient light painting patterns across the void that had remained unchanged for billions of years. The survey vessel Prosperity Dawn glided through this emptiness with the grace of a creature born to swim between worlds. Its hull gleamed with the iridescent sheen that marked all vessels of the Galactic Council, a rainbow shimmer that spoke of advanced metallurgy and supreme confidence. Commander Xyloth stood on the bridge, his forearms crossed in a posture that conveyed both authority and boredom, his compound eyes capable of seeing into spectrums no human eye could perceive, tracked the sensor displays with practiced disinterest. The insectoid commander had been on survey duty for 3 cycles now, and each day brought nothing but empty space and disappointing asteroid fields. His chitinous exoskeleton clicked softly as he shifted his weight, mandibles working in a gesture his crew had learned meant their commander was deeply unimpressed with the universe commander. The voice of Science Officer Kriva broke the quiet hum of the bridge systems. The reptilian officer's scaled hands danced across her console, her vertical pupils dilating with something that might have been excitement. We have detected an anomaly at coordinates 77 Mark 32. Xyloth's antennae perked slightly. Define anomaly, Science Officer. A vessel, Commander. Derelict by all readings. Massive in size. No power signature, no life signs, no identification beacon. Kriva's tongue flicked out, tasting the air in the way her species did when processing complex information. Preliminary scans suggest extreme age. Commander, I estimate this vessel has been drifting here for over 2,000 standard years. That got the attention of the bridge crew. Junior Officer Talana, whose feathered crest rose and fell with her emotions, leaned forward from her navigation station. Her avian eyes fixed on the main display as it flickered to life, showing the object in question. The vessel that appeared on screen was unlike anything in the modern galactic fleet. Where council ships were elegant curves and flowing lines that spoke of artistic sensibility and advanced force field dynamics, this thing was all harsh angles and brutal functionality. It looked less like a ship and more like a flying fortress, a rectangular monster bristling with protrusions that could only be weapon emplacements. Thick armor plating covered every surface, scarred and pitted by what must have been countless impacts. Xyloth let out a clicking laugh, a sound like stones rattling in a jar. What primitive species built that monstrosity? It looks like something a child would assemble from scrap metal. Several bridge officers joined in the amusement. Even Kriva, usually more reserved, allowed her scaled lips to curl into what passed for a smile among her kind. The design was simply absurd by modern standards. No elegant energy matrices, no visible field generators, just layer upon layer of physical armor like some ancient fortress from a barbaric age. Scanning for materials composition, Kriva announced, still working her console. Then she paused, her crest of small horns flattening against her skull in confusion. Commander, this is unusual. Our sensors cannot penetrate the hull. The material composition is unknown to our databases. Unknown? Xyloth's voice carried a note of skepticism. The Galactic Council had cataloged millions of materials across thousands of worlds. Run the scan again. I have run it 3 times, Commander. The hull is reflecting our sensor beams. I can tell you it is dense, incredibly dense. But beyond that, she trailed off, clearly frustrated by her instrument's limitations. Talana spoke up, her melodious voice carrying the natural song-like quality of her avian species. Commander, perhaps we should approach with caution. If our sensors cannot read it, we cannot know what dangers it might pose. Xyloth waved a dismissive hand. It has been dead in space for 2 millennia, Junior Officer. I hardly think we need fear a derelict. However, you are correct that we should investigate. A discovery this old could have significant historical value. At the very least, the scrap metal might be worth something. He turned to his communications officer, a gelatinous being whose form rippled with bioluminescent patterns when it spoke. Send word to the Council. We have discovered an ancient vessel of unknown origin and are conducting salvage operations. Estimated return to dock, 3 standard weeks. The communications officer pulsed with acknowledgement colors and set about its task. As the Prosperity Dawn maneuvered closer to the derelict, more details became visible. The vessel was enormous, easily 3 times the size of their survey ship and twice as wide. Gun ports lined its flanks in neat rows, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Each port was sealed now, but the size of the barrels that must have once protruded from them suggested weapons of terrifying magnitude. "Look at all those weapons," breathed Talana, her feathers ruffling with unconscious unease. What manner of species needed so much firepower? "A dead one, clearly," Xyloth replied with smug certainty. "The council races have maintained peace for 10,000 years through diplomacy and cooperation. Only primitive, violent species resort to such excessive militarization. No doubt they destroyed themselves in some barbaric war, and this is all that remains of their civilization." Kriva was still studying her sensors, her scientific mind troubled by what she was seeing, or rather by what she was not seeing. "Commander, I must stress again how unusual this is. The power generation system, the propulsion mechanism, the weapons systems, all of it is hidden from our scans. I have never encountered technology designed with such comprehensive sensor resistance. Perhaps they simply lacked our sophisticated detection systems and built everything thick, enough that their own primitive scanners could not penetrate it," Xyloth suggested. "Prepare a boarding party. I want a full survey team over there within the hour. Strip anything of value, document what you can for the historians, and let us be done with this tedious assignment." The boarding party assembled in the docking bay. They were equipped with cutting torches, gravity nullifiers, and atmospheric suits capable of sustaining them in any environment. Talana had volunteered for the team, her curiosity overcoming her instinctive caution. Kriva led the scientific contingent, determined to solve the mystery of this strange vessel's construction. As they approached the derelict in their shuttle, the scale of it became even more apparent. Up close, the armor plating revealed textures and patterns that suggested multiple layers, each one designed to absorb or deflect different types of weapons fire. Whoever built this ship had not trusted energy shields alone. They had believed in physical barriers in metal so thick that nothing could penetrate it. The shuttle found what appeared to be a docking port, though it was sealed tight and showed no signs of responding to their hailing signals. The team deployed their cutting equipment, powerful plasma torches that could slice through any known material. It took them 40 minutes to cut through the door. 40 minutes for equipment that could normally breach a reinforced bunker wall in seconds. When they finally broke through, the team found themselves in an airlock chamber large enough to hold their entire shuttle. Emergency lighting flickered on, dim red strips that cast everything in an eerie crimson glow. "Did we activate something?" Talana asked, her hand instinctively moving to the plasma pistol at her side. Kriva checked her handheld scanner. "No power readings. These must be emergency systems running on some sort of backup cell. After 2,000 years, it is remarkable they function at all." The team moved deeper into the vessel, and with each corridor they traversed, their mockery faded to confused silence. The passages were wide, built for beings taller and broader than any of them. The construction was robust beyond reason. Every bulkhead thick enough to serve as armor. Every junction reinforced as if the builders expected the ship itself to become a battlefield. And then Kriva stopped at a wall panel, her scaled fingers tracing symbols etched into the metal. Her breath caught in her throat as recognition dawned. "Commander Xyloth," she spoke into her communicator, her voice tight with shock. "You need to see this. These symbols. These are Earth languages. Commander, this ship is human." Back on the Prosperity Dawn, Xyloth's laughter echoed across the bridge. Humans? Those primitive apes who barely made it off their own planet before destroying themselves? Impossible. Our records show they never achieved deep space capability. But even as he spoke, deep in the ancient warship's computer core, systems that had slept for 2,000 years began to wake. The presence of unknown life forms had triggered protocols written in an age of fire and blood. And in the darkness of dead circuits, something that was not quite alive but not quite machine began to remember its purpose. The humans who built this ship had designed it to survive. More than that, they had designed it to fight. And most important of all, they had designed it to never, ever give up. The boarding team moved through corridors that seemed designed for giants. Talana had to spread her wings slightly to maintain balance on floors built for heavier creatures, while Kriva's scientific instruments hummed constantly as she recorded every detail of the bizarre architecture surrounding them. The emergency lighting continued to flicker, casting shadows that danced like ghosts of the crew that once walked these halls. "This makes no sense," Kriva muttered, running her scaled hands along a wall panel. According to all Galactic Council records, humans never left their home system. They were involved in primitive nuclear conflicts in their industrial age, and presumably destroyed themselves around the year 2100 by Earth reckoning. Yet this vessel suggests technology far beyond what they should have possessed. Talana paused at an intersection, her keen avian eyes spotting something the others had missed. "Look here," she called, pointing to a plate mounted on the wall. Beneath a layer of dust that had somehow accumulated in the vacuum of space, symbols were etched deep into the metal. Kriva approached and carefully wiped away the grime. The symbols revealed themselves in 3 distinct scripts, one of which she recognized from xenoarchaeology studies. "English, one of Earth's dominant languages," she read aloud. "It says Deck 7 weapons control authorized personnel only, and below that something else." She traced the additional markings. Chinese characters and Cyrillic script. The same message in 3 human languages. "Why would they need so many languages?" asked one of the security officers, a crystalline being whose body refracted the red emergency lights into prismatic patterns. "Did humans not have translation technology?" "They did," Kriva confirmed, confusion evident in her voice. "But perhaps this ship was built during a time when human nations were still separate. A joint venture, maybe? But that would place this vessel's construction during Earth's pre-space era, which cannot be correct. The technology required to build something this large in space." Her words trailed off as they reached a massive door, easily 5 meters tall and 3 wide. The metal was scarred with impact marks, as if something had tried very hard to break through and failed. Stenciled across the surface in faded white paint were words in English. "Bridge. UES Unbroken. Dreadnought class." "UES," Talana sounded out the letters. "What does that mean?" "United Earth Space, perhaps," Kriva suggested. "And Dreadnought class. I have never heard this classification before." The security team worked on the door mechanism, and after several minutes of effort, massive hydraulic systems groaned to life. The sound echoed through the empty ship like the growl of some mechanical beast awakening from ancient slumber. Slowly, ponderously, the door split in the middle and retracted into the walls. The bridge beyond was a cavern of purpose-built functionality. Stations ringed a central command platform, each one built with redundant systems visible even to the untrained eye. Backup panels sat beside primary controls, and those had tertiary systems waiting beneath emergency access hatches. Everything was built thick, armored, designed to keep functioning even if the rest of the ship was torn apart. Kriva approached what appeared to be the main computer terminal. The screen was dark, but as her hand neared the console, proximity sensors activated. The screen flickered to life with green phosphorescent text, the kind of display that could function even if every advanced system failed. Biometric scan failed, the screen read in block letters. "Unauthorized personnel detected." "It still has power," breathed one of the engineers in awe. "After 2,000 years, it still has power." Talana moved to another console, this one showing what appeared to be a tactical display. As she leaned closer, the screen activated, throwing up wireframe schematics of the ship they stood in. The avian officer gasped at what she saw. "By the stars. Look at this." The team gathered around as the display rotated the ship's schematic. The vessel was a flying fortress in truth. Armor plating measured in meters thick covered every vital system. Weapons batteries lined every angle, providing overlapping fields of fire that would make it nearly impossible to approach without being targeted by dozens of guns simultaneously. The power plant alone was larger than most modern corvettes, and there were 3 of them, each capable of running the ship independently. "This is insane," whispered the crystalline security officer. "No modern vessel is built like this. The resource cost alone would bankrupt a small planet. Why would anyone need this much redundancy, this much armor, this much firepower?" Kriva's hands flew across the console, her scientific training taking over. "I am accessing the ship's database. It appears the primary systems are locked, but some historical files are available in public directories." She paused, her eyes widening as she read. "Team, you need to hear this." She activated the audio system and a voice filled the bridge. It was human, male, speaking English with an accent that sounded strange even through the translation software their suits provided. The voice was tired, worn down by something that sounded like soul-deep exhaustion. "Captain's log, UES Unbroken, date November 17th, 2387. We've been fighting for 3 years now. 3 years since the Devourers came. 3 years since we learned we weren't alone in the universe. 3 years since we learned the galaxy could produce nightmares worse than anything we imagined. The team exchanged glances. Devourers? There was no such species in any galactic database. The recording continued. We've lost Earth, Mars, the colonies in the outer system. The Devourers don't conquer, they consume. They don't negotiate, they assimilate. Every ship we lose, every station that falls, it feeds them and makes them stronger. We're building the dreadnoughts now. Building them as fast as we can, but we're running out of everything. Running out of materials, running out of time, running out of hope. The voice paused and they could hear the sound of breathing, heavy and labored. But we're not running out of spite. We're not running out of anger. And we're sure as hell not running out of bullets. The Unbroken is ready for launch. 50 decks, 4,000 crew. Enough firepower to crack a planet. We built her to last, built her to fight, built her to make sure that even if humanity falls, we take those bastards with us. The recording ended abruptly, leaving the boarding team in shocked silence. The year 2387, Kriva said quietly. That is nearly 500 years before the Galactic Council was even formed. This ship is older than our entire civilization. Talana's feathers were flat against her body, a sign of deep distress among her people. He spoke of an enemy called the Devourers, an enemy that consumed planets. Why is there no record of this? Why is there no record of this war? Before anyone could answer, the console Kriva was working at suddenly flashed bright red. Alarms began to wail, not the soft modern tones of council ships, but harsh klaxons designed to cut through the noise of battle and the screams of dying crew. Warning! A synthetic voice boomed through the bridge speakers. Unauthorized personnel detected. Species classification unknown. Threat assessment. Possible Devourer infiltration units. What did we do? Shouted the security chief, his crystalline form flashing with alarm colors. The lights throughout the bridge surged from dim red to blazing white. Displays that had been dark for millennia flickered to life. The tactical screens showed the Prosperity Dawn hanging in space nearby, and targeting reticles began to appear around it. Initiating defensive protocols. The synthetic voice continued with mechanical indifference. Main power plants coming online. Weapons systems activating. Primary mission parameters. Protect humanity. Eliminate Devourer forces. Kriva lunged for the console, trying desperately to input commands that the ancient system might recognize. It thinks we're enemies. It thinks we're these Devourers. Get back to the shuttle, Talana ordered, her command voice cutting through the panic. Move now! The team ran, their footsteps echoing through corridors that were suddenly alive with light and sound. Behind them they could hear massive mechanical systems engaging, the sound of weapons batteries rotating into firing positions, the deep thrumming hum of reactors that had been cold for 2,000 years suddenly burning hot again. They reached the shuttle bay to find their craft still intact, but the outer doors were beginning to close. The team threw themselves through the narrowing gap, the shuttle pilot firing thrusters before everyone was even properly seated. They shot out into space just as the doors sealed behind them with final crushing force. On the Prosperity Dawn, Commander Xyloth watched in disbelief as the ancient warship came to life. Running lights illuminated along its hull, revealing the true scale of the vessel. It was even larger than their initial scan suggested, and as he watched, weapon ports that had been sealed for millennia began to iris open like mechanical eyes awakening. Commander, his tactical officer said, voice tight with fear, that ship is targeting us. I count over 200 individual weapon systems locked on our position. Xyloth's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation among his species. Impossible. It's a derelict. It's been dead for... His words were cut off as the ancient warship's engines ignited. Not the clean, efficient fusion drives of modern vessels, but something else entirely. Massive exhaust plumes of nuclear fire erupted from dozens of thruster ports. The shuttle carrying Kriva and her team docked with the Prosperity Dawn in a controlled crash, the pilot prioritizing speed over elegance. As the team stumbled onto their ship, alarms were already blaring throughout every deck. The ancient warship hung in space before them, no longer a dead relic but a living threat, its hull lit by running lights that formed patterns spelling out warnings in dead human languages. Commander Xyloth stood rigid on the bridge, all four arms gripping the railing of the command platform so tightly his chiton creaked. His compound eyes tracked the tactical display where the ancient vessel's weapons tracked his ship with mechanical precision. Science officer, report! Kriva burst onto the bridge, her scales flushed with the color that indicated elevated stress. Commander, the ship's virtual intelligence has activated. It has classified us as enemies, as something called devourers. We must leave immediately before her warning came too late. On the tactical display, one of the hundreds of weapon ports on the ancient ship flashed bright. A projectile, physical matter accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed, crossed the distance between the ships in milliseconds. It struck the Prosperity Dawn's port shield generator. Modern Galactic Council shields were marvels of technology, energy matrices that could dissipate the force of particle beams and deflect missiles. They were not designed to stop solid slugs of metal traveling at relativistic speeds. The projectile punched through the energy field as if it were not there, struck the generator housing, and converted both into an expanding sphere of vaporized metal. "Port shields down," screamed the tactical officer. "Hull breach on decks 4 through 6. Damage control teams responding. Xyloth's mandibles clicked in rapid-fire agitation. "Return fire! All weapons target that derelict." The Prosperity Dawn was not a warship, but like all Council vessels, it carried defensive weapons. Particle beam arrays swiveled to track the ancient human ship and fired, lancing out beams of concentrated energy that could slag through meter-thick armor. The beams struck the Unbroken's hull and scattered, diffracted by layers of ablative material designed specifically to defeat directed energy weapons. Missiles followed, the smart munitions racing toward their target with AI guidance systems that could adjust to any countermeasure. The ancient ship's point defense systems activated. Hundreds of small turrets, each one moving with hydraulic precision, swiveled to track incoming threats. They fired not beams of energy but streams of solid rounds, walls of metal that intercepted and destroyed every missile before they came within 100 meters of the hull. "Our weapons are ineffective," the tactical officer reported, his voice rising in panic. "Commander, we need to retreat." But Xyloth's pride had been wounded, his certainty that Council technology was superior to all challenged by a ship that should not even be functional. "All power to main particle cannon. I will not be humiliated by a primitive human relic." The Prosperity Dawn's primary weapon, a massive cannon that ran along the spine of the ship, began to charge. It drew power from the main reactor, causing lights throughout the vessel to dim. When it fired, it would release enough energy to cut through any known material. The weapon represented the pinnacle of modern galactic engineering. It charged for 15 seconds, the capacitors building up massive amounts of energy. Then it fired, a beam of pure destruction that lit up space like a newborn star. The beam struck the Unbroken dead center on its forward armor. For 3 full seconds, the particle beam hammered against the ancient ship's hull. The armor glowed white-hot, then yellow, then began to sublime into vapor. The beam was cutting through, digging a crater into the metal, proving that modern weapons could indeed damage this ancient vessel. Then the beam cut off as the Prosperity Dawn's capacitors emptied. The bridge crew held their breath, watching the tactical display. The glowing crater in the Unbroken's armor cooled rapidly in the vacuum of space, and as it cooled, they could see that the damage was only superficial. The beam had cut through perhaps 2 meters of armor. The hull plating was 12 meters thick in that section. "By all the stars," whispered Talana, who had made her way to the bridge. "What manner of species builds armor that thick?" Kriva's clawed hands flew across her console, pulling up the data they had recovered from the ancient ship's database. "A species that fights enemies who can crack planets," she said grimly. "A species that expects their ships to be targeted by weapons we cannot imagine. Commander, we must retreat. Now." Xyloth finally seemed to grasp the magnitude of their situation. "Helm, get us out of here! Maximum speed!" The Prosperity Dawn's engines flared to life, pushing the ship into a turn that would take them away from the ancient warship. For a moment it seemed they might escape. The Unbroken hung motionless in space, watching them with sensors that were primitive by modern standards but still functional after millennia of dormancy. Then the ancient ship moved. Its massive nuclear engines ignited with a fury that lit up every sensor on the Council vessel. The Unbroken did not turn gracefully or maneuver with the elegant efficiency of modern ships. It simply pointed itself at its target and accelerated with raw, overwhelming power. "It's pursuing," the helm officer cried. "Speed increasing. By all the stars, it's matching our velocity." "That's impossible," Xyloth insisted. A ship that size, that mass, cannot match the acceleration of a modern survey vessel. But it did. The Unbroken was built by humans who understood that sometimes the only difference between life and death was being able to run down your enemy or escape when victory was impossible. Its engines were massive, inefficient by modern standards, but they produced thrust through sheer brute force that made up for any lack of elegance. More weapons ports opened along the ancient ship's flanks. These were larger, the barrels of main guns designed to engage targets at extreme range. The Unbroken fired, and this time it was not a single projectile but a volley. Dozens of massive rounds, each one the size of a ground transport, streaked across space trailing plumes of rocket exhaust. They were self-propelled, guided by targeting systems that had been state-of-the-art 2,000 years ago and were still more than capable of hitting a fleeing ship. The rounds struck the Gaal, Prosperity Dawn's remaining shields, and tore through them. Explosions rippled along the survey ship's hull as armor plating, designed to stop micrometeorites and radiation, simply vaporized under the impact of weapons meant to destroy other warships. The ship shuddered like a living thing in pain, and klaxons wailed as atmosphere vented from dozens of hull breaches. "Engines damaged," reported the engineering station. "We're losing power. Main reactor is cycling down to prevent overload." The Prosperity Dawn limped to a halt, powerless to run or fight. On the bridge, Commander Xyloth finally understood that his ship, his crew, everything he was responsible for, was at the mercy of a war machine built by a species the galaxy had dismissed as primitive and extinct. The Unbroken closed the distance, moving with the inevitability of an avalanche. It positioned itself above the crippled Council vessel, hundreds of weapons trained on vital systems. On the Council ship's bridge, a communications panel that had been silent suddenly crackled to life with a voice that should not exist, transmitted in a format that was centuries obsolete but still functional. "Unauthorized vessel, you have fired upon United Earth space assets. Power down all systems and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will be met with destruction. You have 30 seconds to comply." The voice was not human. It was the synthetic, emotionless tone of a virtual intelligence. A machine mind that had been programmed by humans who knew they might not survive to see their creation fulfill its purpose. But beneath the mechanical delivery there was something else, something that sent chills through every member of the Council crew. There was absolute certainty, complete confidence, the voice of something that had been built to fight and win no matter the odds. Kriva, still at her console, had been frantically accessing the data they had recovered from the ancient ship. Her eyes widened as she read, and her voice shook as she spoke. "Commander, I have found more historical files." The humans, they didn't destroy themselves. They fought a war against something called the Devourers, a species that consumed worlds. The Galactic Council has no records of this because it happened before the Council existed, before any of our species had achieved spaceflight. She looked up at Xyloth. Her vertical pupils dilated with fear. "The humans won, Commander. They built ships like this one, hundreds of them, and they fought a war of extinction against an enemy that was consuming the galaxy. They won. But the cost was so terrible that afterwards She trailed off, reading more. "They chose to vanish, to hide. The historical files are incomplete, but it appears they sent their surviving population to refuge worlds and erased as much evidence of the war as possible, perhaps to prevent other species from learning what weapons had been created, what tactics had been used." "Then where are they now?" Talana asked, her feathers ruffled with distress. "If they won, if they survived, where did the humans go?" Kriva brought up a star chart on her display, old human data overlaid with modern galactic coordinates. According to the Unbroken's navigation logs, it was part of a defensive perimeter. It and ships like it were left to patrol, to watch for the return of the Devourer. The distress signal from the Prosperity Dawn had reached the nearest Galactic Council station within hours of the first attack. What arrived 3 days later was not a rescue ship, but a battle group, 6 warships representing the military might of 3 different Council species. They were sleek vessels of modern design, each one bristling with particle beam arrays, missile pods, and shield generators that could withstand the full output of a star for brief moments. Admiral Vexnor commanded the battle group from the heavy cruiser Divine Purpose. The Admiral was a being of pure energy, his consciousness contained within a crystalline matrix that served as his body. He had commanded Council fleets for 200 years and had never lost a ship under his command. As his fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel, He surveyed the situation with sensors that could detect quantum fluctuations. The Prosperity Dawn hung in space like a wounded animal, its hull scarred and breached. Life support maintained only through desperate engineering work, and beyond it the ancient human warship waited, its weapons silent but its sensors clearly tracking every ship in the Council battle group. "This is the vessel that defeated you?" Vexnor's voice resonated through communication crystals carrying harmonics of disbelief. "It appears crude, inefficient. Explain how a modern Council ship was bested by this relic." Commander Xyloth's response came through crackling with static from the Prosperity Dawn's damaged systems. "Admiral, that ship's weapons penetrated our shields as if they were not there. Its armor withstood our main particle cannon. And, Admiral, it's not a derelict. There's something inside it. A virtual intelligence that thinks we're enemies from an ancient war. It's heading somewhere, following coordinates to unknown space." Vexnor processed this information through logic patterns that were fundamentally different from organic thought. "Then we will stop it. Council authority supersedes the programming of any ancient machine. All ships battle formation. We will disable this vessel and claim it for study." The 6 warships moved into a perfect sphere formation around the Unbroken, each one positioned to provide overlapping fields of fire while supporting each other's shields. It was a formation perfected over thousands of years of Council military doctrine, designed to defeat any threat through coordinated superiority. Unknown vessel. Vexnor broadcast on all frequencies, using translation protocols that should work on any system capable of receiving radio waves. "You are in violation of Galactic Council space. Power down all systems and prepare to be boarded. This is your only warning." For a long moment there was no response. Then, unexpectedly, the ancient ship answered. Not with the synthetic voice of its virtual intelligence, but with a recording. A human voice that must have been stored in its memory for 2 millennia. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth space vessel Unbroken, speaking to whoever finds this ship after I'm gone." The voice was female, speaking English that the translation systems rendered into each species' native language. But something in the original tone carried through. Something tired and determined and completely unafraid. "If you're hearing this, it means the automated systems have been activated. It means the Unbroken thinks it's found either the Devourers or humanity. If you're not human and you're not the Devourers, then I recommend you get out of the way." Vexnor's crystalline form pulsed with colors indicating irritation. "A recording. The machine cannot negotiate. All ships, target weapon systems and engines. Fire on my mark." But before he could give the order, the human voice continued. "This ship was built for one purpose. To fight, to survive, to make sure that humanity had a future even if we had to burn the galaxy to ash to secure it. We built the Unbroken and her sister ships because we learned a hard truth. In this universe, being peaceful means nothing if you can't also be dangerous. Being civilized means nothing if you can't also be savage. We didn't want to build war machines, but we did, because the alternative was extinction." The recording paused, and in the silence, every sensor in the Council fleet detected a massive power surge from the ancient ship. Systems that had been running on minimal energy suddenly ramped up to full combat readiness. "The Unbroken has never surrendered," Captain Chen's voice concluded. "She never will. Humanity built her to endure. So I'll ask you once, whoever you are, get out of our way." The recording ended, and the ancient warship's weapons ports irised open. All of them. Hundreds upon hundreds of gun barrels, missile tubes, and energy weapons that should not still function, but clearly did. The sight was enough to make even Admiral Vexnor pause. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "we're detecting massive energy buildup in multiple systems. Reactor output is exceeding theoretical maximums for a ship of this size." "Admiral, I don't think it's bluffing." "It's a machine," Vexnor replied with certainty. "Machines follow logic. It cannot win against 6 modern warships. It will recognize the futility of resistance." He opened a fleet-wide channel. All ships fire. The Council battle group unleashed everything. Particle beams from 6 ships converged on the Unbroken, enough energy to boil away atmosphere from a planet. Missiles streaked from their pods, hundreds of them, each one guided by artificial intelligence that could predict and counter any evasive maneuver. It was overwhelming firepower, coordinated assault that represented the pinnacle of modern warfare. The Unbroken did not try to dodge. It did not maneuver or attempt to outrun the incoming fire. Instead, it did what it was designed to do. It took the hit and fought back. The particle beam struck the ancient armor and began to burn through, melting away layers of metal. But there were so many layers, and each one was designed to absorb and dissipate different wavelengths of energy. By the time the beams burned through the outer armor, they had lost coherence, scattering and spreading across backup plates that channeled the heat away to radiators buried deep in the hull. The missiles came next, and the Unbroken's point defense grid activated with mechanical efficiency. Thousands of small-caliber guns, each one firing solid slugs at rates measured in hundreds of rounds per second, created walls of metal in space. The incoming missiles flew into these walls and disintegrated, torn apart by impacts that overwhelmed their guidance systems and structural integrity. And then the Unbroken returned fire. The ancient ship had been built during an era when humans still believed in the simple effectiveness of kinetic energy. Its main guns fired solid slugs, massive projectiles accelerated to incredible velocities by electromagnetic rails that ran the length of the ship. These were not elegant weapons. They could not adjust their trajectory after firing, could not track moving targets with perfect precision, but what they lacked in sophistication, they made up for in raw, devastating power. The first salvo struck the Divine Purpose amidships. The modern cruiser's shields flared brilliant blue as they absorbed the kinetic energy, converting it to heat and light. The shields held for a fraction of a second. Then they failed, overloaded by simple momentum that no energy field could fully dissipate. The projectiles punched through the hull, and where they struck, armor that was designed to stop energy weapons simply crumpled like paper. "Shields down," screamed the Divine Purpose's tactical officer. "Hull breaches on decks 12 through 18. We're venting atmosphere." Vexnor's crystalline form blazed with colors indicating shock. "How?" "Our shields are rated to withstand direct hits from capital ship weapons." But Kriva, listening from the disabled Prosperity Dawn, understood. She had been reading the Unbroken's historical files obsessively since the first encounter, trying to understand the humans who had built this monster. "Admiral, their weapons are not designed to fight shielded opponents. They're designed to fight enemies with different defenses. Your shields are optimized for energy absorption. Those projectiles are just mass and velocity. Physics doesn't care how advanced your technology is." The battle group tried to reform, the 5 remaining active warships moving to support the crippled Divine Purpose. They poured fire into the Unbroken, and this time they saw results. Armor plating cracked and shattered under sustained bombardment. Sections of the ancient hull began to glow red, then white, then sublime into vapor. The Council ships were winning through attrition, burning away the Unbroken's armor layer by layer. But the ancient ship kept fighting. For every weapon system the Council ships destroyed, the Unbroken had backups. For every armor plate they burned through, there were more beneath. And all the while its main guns kept firing with metronomic precision, targeting one Council ship at a time with ruthless efficiency. A destroyer, smaller and faster than the cruiser, tried to use its speed to close range where its weapons would be most effective. The Unbroken's secondary batteries tracked it, hundreds of smaller guns that fired in coordinated volleys. The destroyer's shields lit up like a newborn star, holding, then failing. The projectiles shredded its hull, tearing through vital systems, and the destroyer went dark, life support failing as its reactor scrammed to prevent a catastrophic detonation. 2 ships disabled, Admiral Vexnor reported, his voice carrying harmonics that indicated something organic species would recognize as fear. "Remaining ships concentrate all fire." The journey took 3 weeks. The Unbroken moved through space with the steady, relentless pace of something that had been traveling for millennia, and would continue traveling for millennia more if necessary. Behind it, the remnants of Admiral Vexnor's battle group limped along, maintaining a respectful distance while emergency crews worked around the clock to repair battle damage. Commander Xyloth had transferred to the Divine Purpose, his own ship still too damaged for anything beyond basic life support. He stood beside Admiral Vexnor on the command bridge, watching the ancient warship on the tactical display. The insectoid commander had been quiet for days, his earlier arrogance burned away by the reality of what they had encountered. "I was a fool," Xyloth said quietly, his mandibles barely moving. "I looked at that ship and saw primitive construction. I saw crude weapons and inefficient design. I didn't see what I should have seen." "And what should you have seen?" Vexnor asked, his crystalline form pulsing with gentle colors that indicated curiosity rather than judgment. "Purpose," Xyloth replied, Every plate of armor, every redundant system, every oversized weapon. It was all built with absolute clarity of purpose. That ship wasn't designed to be elegant or efficient. It was designed to survive and fight, nothing else. The humans who built it understood something we've forgotten in our 10,000 years of peace. Kriva, who had also transferred to the command ship, looked up from her console where she had been studying the human historical files obsessively. "What have we forgotten, Commander?" "That sometimes the only way to guarantee peace is to be so dangerous that no one dares threaten you." The science officer's scaled head bobbed in what might have been agreement. "I have been reading about the Devourers, about the war the humans fought. The files are incomplete, corrupted by time and battle damage. But I have pieced together enough to understand why the humans built ships like the Unbroken." She brought up images on the main display, grainy photographs and tactical scans from human archives. The Devourers were a machine intelligence, but not like anything we know. They consumed organic life, converting biomass into more of themselves. They spread like a plague, world to world, system to system. The images showed worlds scoured clean of life, civilizations reduced to ash and metal, ships twisted into grotesque parodies of their original forms. The humans encountered them less than 5 years after achieving faster-than-light travel. First contact was not a meeting of minds, but a slaughter. Entire colonies, millions of humans consumed in days. And the Devourers kept coming, kept spreading, using the resources of each conquered world to build more ships, more weapons. Talana, who had been listening quietly, her feathers ruffled with distress, spoke up. "How did they win? If this enemy was so terrible, so overwhelming, how did one species defeat them?" Kriva's vertical pupils dilated as she read from the files. "They didn't fight honorably. They didn't follow rules of engagement or worry about proportional response. The humans realized they were in a war of extinction, and they responded accordingly. They built ships like the Unbroken by the hundreds. They developed weapons that could crack planets. They pursued the Devourers to every corner of known space and destroyed them utterly. And then..." She paused, reading something that made her scales pale. "Then they destroyed every trace of the war they could. They burned their own worlds, the ones the Devourers had touched, sterilizing them with nuclear fire to ensure no remnant of the enemy survived. They erased databases, destroyed research facilities, and scattered their own population to hidden refuge worlds." "Why?" Vexnor asked, his harmonics carrying genuine confusion. "Why hide such a victory?" "Because they were afraid," Kriva said softly. "Afraid of what they had become. Afraid of what they had learned about themselves. The humans went into that war as explorers and dreamers. They came out of it as something else entirely, something that scared them more than the Devourers ever did." Before anyone could respond, every sensor on the bridge lit up simultaneously. They had arrived at the coordinates. The star system that appeared before them should not have existed. Every council survey of this region had reported empty space, a void between the spiral arms where nothing of interest could be found. But as the battered council fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel, they saw the truth. The system was hidden behind a web of technology so advanced it made council stealth systems look like children's toys. Satellites that bent light and gravity, sensor decoys that created false readings, gravitational lenses that made the entire system invisible to any casual scan. And as the council ships emerged into real space, that veil was deliberately lifted, revealing what had been hidden for 2,000 years. 7 planets orbited a yellow star. 3 of them showed signs of massive habitation. Orbital structures ringed each world. Not the elegant stations of council design, but sturdy functional constructs built to last centuries. And ships, hundreds of ships, moved between the planets in carefully coordinated traffic patterns. But what made Xyloth's mandibles freeze in mid-click? What caused Vexnor's crystalline form to pulse with colors indicating awe? What made every member of every crew stop and stare were the defense platforms. They ringed the system in 3 concentric spheres, each one hundreds of kilometers apart. The platforms were massive, each one larger than a council battle station, and they bristled with weapons that made the Unbroken's armament look modest. These were fortresses, strong points designed to turn the entire star system into a killing field that nothing could cross. And at the heart of the system, in orbital docks around the second planet, ships rested in various states of construction and maintenance, not ships like the Unbroken, though there were several of those. These were newer designs, sleeker but no less deadly. clearly built with lessons learned from ancient wars but incorporating technology that seemed to blend council elegance with human practicality. "By all the stars," Talana whispered. "They're still here. The humans are still here." A communication channel opened using modern Galactic Council protocols but with an unmistakable human accent. "Unknown vessels, this is New Terra Space Command. You have entered the territorial space of the United Terran Refuge. Your damaged vessels and non-hostile posture has been noted. We are prepared to offer assistance if required." The voice was calm, professional, and carried none of the aggressive certainty of the Unbroken's ancient recordings. But beneath the diplomacy there was something else, an undercurrent of quiet confidence that came from knowing that every weapon in the system was tracking the Council ships. Admiral Vexnor responded after a moment of what his species used for composing oneself. "New Terra Space Command, this is Admiral Vexnor of the Galactic Council Fleet. We have accompanied one of your vessels to these coordinates. It appears to be an automated warship from your historical era." "We're aware," the human voice replied. "The Unbroken triggered our long-range sensors 3 days ago. We've been preparing to receive her. Admiral, permission to approach your fleet with a diplomatic shuttle? I believe we have much to discuss." The shuttle that arrived an hour later was small, elegant, and showed design principles that seemed to merge human functionality with aesthetic sensibilities the Council would recognize. It docked with the divine purpose under the careful watch of security teams who were unsure whether to treat the approaching humans as honored guests or potential threats. The human who emerged from the airlock was a woman, middle-aged by her species standards, wearing a uniform that was crisp and formal. She moved with the careful grace of someone accustomed to different gravities, and her eyes, brown and warm, took in the assembled council officers with what looked like a mix of curiosity and carefully controlled amusement. "Admiral Vexnor," she said, extending her hand in the human gesture of greeting. "I'm Ambassador Sarah Chen. Yes, Chen. My family has been using that name for 80 generations now since the war. I'm told my ancestor commanded the Unbroken before her final voyage." Vexnor, through his crystalline form, extended an energy tendril to touch her hand briefly. "Ambassador Chen, your people have much to answer for. That warship destroyed 3 of my vessels and damaged 4 others." The ambassador's expression became more serious. "And you fired on a vessel that was clearly damaged, clearly not responding to your communications, clearly following automated protocols. Admiral, the Unbroken and ships like her were programmed with very specific instructions. Protect humanity. Assess all unknown contacts as potential threats. Return to rally points if primary mission parameters cannot be fulfilled." She paused, her voice becoming softer. "She's been alone for 2,000 years, Admiral. Running on automated protocols, maintaining a patrol pattern, waiting for orders that never came. And then you woke her up and immediately attacked her. What did you expect would happen?" The bridge was silent. Finally, Kriva spoke up, her scientific curiosity overcoming her caution. "Ambassador, the galaxy has no record of your species' achievements. No record of the war you fought, the enemy you defeated. Why hide? Why remain isolated for 2 millennia when you clearly possess technology that could benefit the entire Galactic Council?" Ambassador Chen's expression became distant, as if looking at something far away in time.